But that's the background for today's event, keeping me on my toes for sure.
Okay, and thank you, Conrad, for doing this for us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it should be fun. So this is an hour, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
So I think my talk should be about a half hour to 40 minutes, and then hopefully get some good Q&A. Is that fine?
Yes,
Yeah.
and Allie will manage Q&A. And I didn't have a deeper bio about you. I just have
That's
the little.
perfectly fine. I'm gonna go over most of that in my talk. So
Okay.
less the
It's been
better.
a great series. We've had amazing people coming through. So
Big shoes to fill.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let the folks in from the waiting room, if that's okay with everyone.
yes.
Okay.
And let me know, should I start sharing my screen now, or just let me know when?
Let's have Kyron do your introduction first, and then we can get your screen going. Okay.
Don't we take care of sharing screens and all that?
It's generally easier for Zoom. It's generally easier if the speaker does it.
Okay. Well, I'm not doing it. Am I?
I'll do it.
No. Conrad's doing it.
Okay. I mean, I don't do it for myself ever.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Seems like we're doing this almost every day now, but we're really thrilled to have Professor Conrad Tucker, a relatively new member of the CMU community, here today. And we are going to talk about his professional journey. And I haven't even heard it, so I know a little bit. This should be really exciting, and we thank him for giving of his time. I think these journey discussions are extremely important for the CMU community. We have outside guests, and you've heard some of them so far, but we're also putting a spotlight on African American faculty and people of color throughout the university more broadly, because we are finding that our students, first of all, want to have a broader sense of who's actually at CMU. And this is particularly important to them in the discussions that I have had, because there's not much diversity in the leadership of the university. And so hearing from those who are actually producing knowledge and teaching our students, even though many of our students won't be able to take their classes, is a way to fill the gap. But also, the university has become very involved in what's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we support that effort. But as I've said in numerous notes that many of you have seen, IPS doesn't need the acronym DEI or something like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor to really become involved in bringing Black voices and others to campus. So with that, let me quickly introduce our speaker, and I mean quickly because he will give his own biography. Professor Conrad Tucker is a chaired professor at CMU in mechanical engineering, and his research focuses on the design and optimization of systems through the acquisition, integration, and mining of large-scale disparate data. So that sounds very CMU-like. He's been involved with the National Science Foundation and the National Academies of Science. I could say a lot more, but I want to turn it over to him and begin the conversation. I will first of all turn it over, though, to Allie Frymorier, who I'd like to thank for organizing this, along with Bill Brink and the rest of the team. She'll give a few housekeeping instructions, and then Professor Tucker will give his remarks. And after that, we'll have a more general discussion. Allie, over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Skinner. Welcome, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items once we get to the Q&A portion. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. I'm on my phone today, so Bill Brink is going to be handling the questions and seeing who raises their hand. Please raise your hand to get in the queue. Once it's your turn, if you're able to do so, please turn on your video. And we are also taking questions anonymously via the chat function. If you can send those to Bill Brink, he will relay those on your behalf anonymously. Dr. Tucker, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Skinner and Ali, for organizing this and inviting me to this event. So let me go ahead and share my screen and see if we can get started. So when I was invited to give this talk, I took it as an opportunity to really do some self-reflection and to see, what aspects of my experiences have shaped who I am today as a researcher, as a scholar, and as an educator. And so I'd like to start several decades ago, what I think was the early inceptions of my desire to be a professor. I did a quick search to see the different places that I've either visited or lived, and this is what the map layout came out with. And my journey starts many decades ago. This is young Conrad, me, and as you can see, at an early age, I had already started to assume the kind of professorial attire. And so this is in Sierra Leone. I believe I was 3 or 4 years old at this time. And when we were when I was 4 years old, my dad
I think we're having trouble hearing.
his PhD in agronomy. So is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. So my earlier childhood was spent in Australia. We spent 4 years there. This is me with a koala bear. Had really nice experiences. I apparently I even developed an Australian accent. I was there long enough to develop an Australian accent. And after 4 years, we moved to Nigeria. My dad got a research scientist position at an international agriculture institute. In fact, they do a lot of collaborations with universities here. And so an early part of my childhood, so this is my elementary school in Nigeria at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. And my earlier experiences, that's me on the far left, close to the teacher, by the way, was spent thinking that this is what the world was. It was this diverse group. I think almost every continent is represented in this picture. My elementary school teacher was from the UK. She was, her and her husband were teachers at the school. We had students from Ireland, Korea, many parts of Africa. And it's these earlier childhood experiences that really shaped my passion for different things as an adult. And so this is one of the field trips that we took while I was at IITA. And I think this is really what developed my passion for aviation. In fact, when I was a child, I wanted to be a pilot. That's what I thought I was going to be when I grew up. I was obsessed with planes. And really that obsession has lasted even up until my adult life. But even at this stage, I really wouldn't consider myself passionate about education. And that really started to change when we moved, after another 4 years, moved to back to Sierra Leone and was immersed in this culture of academics. So, academics was revered if you did well in school. So this is an example of like there was an annual award ceremony, and it was always this competition of who had the most books stacked up won the most awards. So it was a very nice, healthy competition, but it was really centered on academics. And that really started to instill my desire and interest in school and really academics. And that thankfully continued to my teenage years, where we moved to the States. And so this is in high school, and one of the early programs that tried to recruit students into engineering. So I went to undergrad at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, and when I was a junior in high school, they had this program where they would, invite students to summer camp to work on engineering projects. So we were building an autonomous, smart car, like a toy car, and this is really what started to get me interested in engineering. So I decided this is me in mechanical engineering, and uh, this is a picture of my immediate family. So my two brothers and younger sister, and my parents, my dad on the left, and my mom on the right. And really, this has been the core of my when I think of my rock and uh, throughout my life. And you can see the same group of individuals. This is me graduating with my PhD from the University of Illinois. We're all much older now, a little less hair, but it's always been, we're super close even to this day. Everyone has their own families now, but really they have been instrumental in kind of encouraging me to be where I am today. And one of my graduation presents after I finished my PhD was actually a flight lesson. So after many years, I finally got to fulfill one of my dreams of flying a plane. Or so that's me in the cockpit, and this is actually over Allentown in Pennsylvania. And so after I graduated, I moved to Pennsylvania. I spent close to a decade at Penn State in their industrial and engineering design program before moving to Pittsburgh uh, the middle to late of last year. And so this is us, my family now, my wife and two children, our daughter Dahlia and son Declan. And so this is our first Christmas in Pittsburgh. So these experiences have really shaped my research interests and really just my outlook in life. And it explains how I even got into the field of artificial intelligence and engineering design. So the way I see the world is trying to democratize not only knowledge, but also access to the tools that enable everyday people to create things. And that's really been at the foundation of my research interests. So our lab at the foundation uses artificial intelligence techniques that have several different research thrusts. And some of the application areas stem from healthcare, cybersecurity, education, and systems design. So if we take a step back and say, well, how did I get into this field of machine learning? It really starts to connect back to how people learn and how I've learned from different experiences throughout my life. And so if you think of the way that people learn, we have the sensors that acquire data. We have some type of model that we develop in our minds. And a lot of the tasks that we do as people really focus on classifying things. And we get feedback either from other people or from our environment itself. So what machine learning and artificial intelligence tries to do is replicate this process using artificial sensors like cameras and microphones and images, and create artificial models that then do similar things that people are doing today. So let's take a look at, and this is hopefully you're ready for a quick quiz to see how well your experiences have shaped who you are today and how you see the world. So if you would humor me in, and I know we're on Zoom, so I can't see the responses, but just keep a mental note of your responses. So if I ask you, what is this? And I'll pause for you uh, to think about this. Now, many of you, just based on past experiences when I've given this exercise, say this is an apple. And I would say, well, yes, this is similar to an apple, but it's actually a picture of an apple. While similar, there are very distinct differences between a picture in an apple and an apple itself. So, based on your experiences with apples, you saw this image and you were able to hopefully correctly say that this is an apple. So now it gets a bit harder. I'm going to show you another picture, and I'm going to ask you what this is. Actually, we have a chat box, right? So I think hopefully I can see if there are any responses. Someone said red pixels. Okay, so let's see some. Okay, so someone said a picture of a ripe banana. And if you said a picture of a banana, you would actually be incorrect. This is a picture of a plantain, which is sort of like a banana, but there are stark differences both visually and also how they're eaten and processed. And so the question is, what is it that makes our experiences with data this exact example, and it was flipped. Most people were able to classify this correctly as a plantain. So this kind of highlights some of the biases that we have within ourselves. I don't know what made you classify this as a banana versus a plantain, but it really starts to emphasize the data-driven nature in terms of how we learn as people. And some of the challenges is that we're taking these same approaches of how people learn, and we're mapping that to how we structure machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms. And so this is where critical AI theory is needed to minimize these biases. This is an example of a project, a current project with the Gates Foundation, that shows just a change in the algorithm itself enables this person who has a darker skin from being recognized. So the algorithm on the left, as you can see, the system, it's like this person doesn't exist. And the algorithm on the right that has those facial markings is at least some of the time recognizing that there is a person in this picture. So imagine if you were from this demographic and you were expecting some AI system to detect who you are. Well, the algorithm really impacts the ability of recognizing people and their biases in how those algorithms actually detect people. So if that's from an algorithmic point of view. Now, if we think of this and mapping this to AI practice, what are the real world implications of this? So this is an example of an NSF project that we got funded for, where we were designing these off-the-shelf robots to help observe students working on engineering tasks and helping them out when they were stuck or having challenges. But as you saw in that previous video, if an AI algorithm is biased in what type of skin color it can detect, well, now you start transferring those biases potentially to how these systems operate in the real world. So this is showing what this this vision-based system is able to see in the real world. The goal is to observe a student. Let's say this is a lab safety environment, to determine if the student has safety goggles on or a coat, and to provide feedback in terms of how well they're doing a particular task. So you'll see here in real time, the student has a coat on, and the system is able to detect the presence of a coat and also the presence of a goggles. And this is really based on a data-driven approach, where the algorithm is learning what looks like a coat or what looks like a safety glasses through a wide range of different training data sets. In addition to recognizing things, the system is able to also determine when to provide feedback to students. So on the far right, you see a skeletal stick figure of that student, it changing color. And this is the system learning in an unsupervised manner anomalies in how one student is performing a task versus another. So you can see that in real world settings, AI is starting to be deployed not only in theory, but in practice, which begs the question, what types of biases are we transferring from human biases, and how do we mitigate those when we start having algorithms deployed at scale? And so as AI advances, the obvious question that comes up is, as AI continues to learn very complex human tasks, what will be left for people to do? This is an example of a pretty complex human task that we train our engineering students to learn how to do. So on the left here is a well-known computer-aided design tool called SolidWorks, and it's used in essence to create a wide range of different geometries, such as aircraft. It's used to create designs of cars, you name it. And now we start seeing the ability of AI to create these geometries in similar ways that people would do. And to answer this question is, well, what are people going to do when AI develops these capabilities? We actually hosted a workshop where Dr. Skinner was one of our panelists, just looking at industry's role, government role, and academia's role in advancing not only AI, but how does STEM education and the workforce have to adapt to these technologies. So we've built upon the findings from this workshop, and these are some of the questions that we're trying to answer today. And one of the kind of governing or funding portfolios that have been proposed is to actually advance personalized learning. So this means that the rate at which students learn, if that rate can be faster than the rate at which AI is learning how to perform a certain task, the goal is that students and society will always be one step ahead of the curve, because we're now able to use AI to augment the speed at which people are able to learn new skill sets and new tasks. So this is an example of a student learning in an immersive simulation environment how to perform tasks without the need for the physical space. And the idea is that this will help accelerate the acquisition of knowledge and skill sets. And the idea of personalized learning is actually a grand challenge from the National Academy of Engineering. And the reason why it's a grand challenge is because of the difficulty it is in personalizing the way that learning occurs. And so right now we have this one size fits all. We have one example, and every student is assumed to understand the context in which that concept is being taught. And what this personalization using AI aims to do, instead of losing students who may not care about planes, for example. I hope you start to see the biases and even the examples I'm presenting today, and that can be traced back to my childhood, which my fascination and love for planes. But what if you have students that just don't care about planes, and so a plane example might cause them to lose interest in the example that is being presented. So instead of having each student have a plain example, you diversify the examples or contexts that different students have. So if a student's passionate about dance, you take the idea and you have the AI system convert that into dance. If you're interested in sports, if you grew up on a farm, just using AI in a way to diversify the way that we teach students, and in so doing, the hope to accelerate the rate at which knowledge is acquired and retained. And this is really what we believe are some of the challenges and opportunities in the 21st century. So, AI is not going away anytime soon. We've already started to see algorithms perform at capabilities that are comparable to expert humans. So instead of kind of rejecting the technology as a whole, how can we leverage it to accelerate the pace in which humans learn new tasks, so tasks of the 21st century? So one of the reasons why I moved to CMU is just because of our leadership in AI and our global presence. So I think that when you think of the 21st century, we are living in a global economy, global environment. Many of our students are international. How do we start to have a global perspective? And I really think, CMU's many campuses and international collaborations help to put us at the forefront of addressing these 21st century challenges. I am also very interested in just the whole Pittsburgh's culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I really think that these combinations are going to put CMU at the forefront of these technologies. So I will end here by summarizing that really when you think of AI and its impact on STEM and society, we cannot just have theory in isolation of practice, or even the rules and policies that govern how they are deployed and integrated. So hopefully we can all work together to help advance these topics. So speaking of working together, this project and my work is not in isolation. I would like to acknowledge my hardworking PhD and graduate students and collaborators across the country, and also the funding agencies that have made this work possible. So with that, I wanted to leave about half of the time for Q&A and some hopefully fruitful discussions. And once again, Dr. Skinner, thank you for the invitation.
I'll start off with a question and then turn it back over to Allie so that we can have questions from others in the audience. You kind of breezed over your childhood. You lived in many different countries. Can you tell us why? And just confirm for us where you were born, and a little bit more along those lines. What's your family bloodline?
Yeah, so I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Um, my family bloodline is difficult to. It would take an entire other section. So the country of Sierra Leone was actually formed during after freed slaves moved back. In fact, the capital city is called Freetown, and so we have connections all across parts of West Africa. When I was 4 years old is when we moved to Australia, and as a kid, I guess I didn't have much say in many of these moving decisions, but that's when my dad moved to do his PhD. And when I was 8 years old, that's when we moved to Nigeria and spent about 3.5 years there until we moved back to Sierra Leone when I was 12, and then moved again when I was 15, and that time was due to the civil unrest that was going on in Sierra Leone at the time, and so it was a very chaotic time in the mid 90s, and that's what served as a catalyst to uh, eventually lead us to move to here in the States.
Thank you. Allie?
Thanks, Dr. Skinner. So because my computer is a little bit on the fritz and I'm on my phone, I am going to tag Bill Brink in to handle the Q&A for me today, so he can keep his eye on hands that are raised and questions that are coming in. So Bill, if you could take over, that would be great.
Absolutely. I'm not as much of an
Thank you.
expert at the Q&A as Allie is, so let me find some raised hands here, if we have any. If not, I'll ask a question to get us started while people think about them. And if you'd like to ask anonymously, oh, I see we have one. Hang on one second. See, this is what happens when Allie delegates to the lesser talented technological people. Mr. Herbsled, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yes, thank you. Conrad, thank you so much for this talk. It was absolutely fascinating. I'm really interested in the personalized learning that you talked about. It seems like a really potentially powerful idea. The example where you're illustrating engineering principles with different kinds of examples for different sorts of audiences. I'm just wondering how close, is that still in just the research stage, or how close are these ideas to being implemented in tools that we could use or techniques that we could use to actually do this kind of thing in the classroom?
Right. So thank you very much for the question. And this is an ongoing area of research that extends beyond our lab itself. It's a National Academy Grand Challenge. The National Science Foundation has several projects and calls to advance personalized learning. So we've made several contributions and advancements in this area, but it's a challenging problem because of several reasons. If for as long as AI continues to be learn in a data-driven manner, how do you acquire the data from a specific demographic that may not have representative data for an AI system to learn from? And so that really starts to present challenges for the personalization for really the people that maybe need it the most. So that's an unsolved challenge as of yet, and it may take advancements in the theoretical realm that reduce the kind of the need for these data-driven approaches, so that the focus is more maybe on the physical principles of the world that can be more easily diversified as opposed to relying on training data.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tucker. We have a question, anonymous question in the chat that I will read off for you. As a third or fourth or fifth culture kid growing up, what are your thoughts on the importance of international work and study for our students?
So I think it's absolutely critical, and it's even critical for AI. And so many of my motivations in terms of, when people make the diversity case, it seems like it's typically focused on an emotional or sentimental dimension. And I would argue that there are strategic benefits in advancing diversities. And I think that the international component just exposes you to diversity in data sets. And since people and AI are data-driven systems, it motivates the need to advance these international collaborations.
Thank you very much. We have a hand raised. Ruel.
Yeah, thanks. Sort of to like go off of that last question, what do you think would be fruitful in order to increase diversity and represented minority populations in STEM fields, where a lot of like Latin kids tend not to enter once they get into the collegiate level?
Sorry, your audio cut out for me at the last part.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to thanks. Sorry. I just wanted to know what you think would be helpful in order to like increase diversity in fields like AI or in other STEM fields, so
Right.
that it's more representative.
Yes, and I think that first is really demystifying AI and presenting these methods in a way that resonates with groups who may not necessarily be that aware or cognizant of these techniques. Researchers, academics, we like to exist in our comfort zone. And I think, it's just that much more difficult to, let's say, tailor what the application domain that to reach out to diverse groups. And this is really why I think even having diversity in, the researchers that lead these AI efforts could potentially translate back to having more students that are interested in these techniques. So what can organizations do? I think it's really expanding the diversity of the faculty or whoever is leading these efforts, who may provide different perspectives that resonate with students who may not necessarily be exposed to these techniques.
Thanks.
Bill, you're muted.
Of course I am. Pardon me, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Tucker. I'll read the next question off here. Artificial intelligence appears to emulate human thinking and experiences. Can AI conduct actual creative thought, such as those done by people?
That's an open question. If you're asking, is that possible today? I would argue no, just based on the state of the art and where AI is. I think the current state of AI is really good at domain-specific successes. So whether or not it's classifying a cat as a cat or a dog as a dog, or even creating data that looks like a dog or a cat, but to actually abstract and have that type of human creativity, I don't know if algorithmically if AI is there yet, because I don't think even as people we understand how people do this. If you ask an artist or a musician to algorithmically describe their process of creating, breakthroughs, I think even they may have difficulty in explaining that. So then how do you replicate something that which you do not understand? I think it's a very challenging problem.
Thank you very much. We have a raised hand from Professor David Dinks.
Hi, Conrad. Thanks so much for
being a part of this series. It was really amazing to get to hear your story. I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about one of the concerns that often gets raised about AI is that it focuses, or much of the work in it focuses on problems that are, shall we say, problems for only a privileged few, rather than thinking about the broad swath of problems that technology might be used to solve. I guess the leading question is, do you think that your experiences growing up in a number of different cultures and communities perhaps gives you a different perspective on what problems are solvable by technology or addressable? If that's right, then are there practical things that you think could be done for those who don't have your particular life experience in order to broaden their horizons about what the set of challenges are that we might want to use technology to try to improve people's lives?
Thank you very much, David. It's a great question and a very thoughtful question. If my life experiences have taught me anything, I think it's to be comfortable in environments that are new to me, to be comfortable in environments that may bring some type of discomfort because of a lack of understanding, and that has translated directly into some of the research projects that we are currently working on. One of the examples is that the video of the lady from of Indian descent and the differences in the algorithms. That's actually that was an on the ground data collection effort in Bangalore, and I physically traveled there. We have existing projects going there, and this was really motivated for the desire to take a research paper that we had published and to translate it to real world settings. And obviously, as you can see, what the paper says and what's on the ground are completely different. We start being presented with these scenarios where the lighting and skin color combination prevented these algorithms that worked very well in lab settings to break down once you deploy them in the real world. Now, I think the incentives in academia would not motivate most researchers to take that extra step of, being on the ground, solving a problem that is about deployment and use case, because that's really not what we're rewarded by. It's the journal publication. What motivated me to go that extra step, I think it really goes back to my background and trying to not only have solutions that are theoretical, but solutions that are practical to the everyday person. And so what you saw, one of the most lowest denominator phones that you can find in developing countries. And that was an intentional constraint that we placed on ourselves so that whatever we're doing actually works. So my advice I would have for researchers or students that are considering going the research route is just to intentionally put yourself in uncomfortable environments. It goes counter to our kind of basic human survival strategy. But I think if we intentionally, make new friends, now would be the perfect time in the politically tense climate that we live in. Go to the other side, regardless if you disagree with their policy. Make a friend. I challenge everyone here to have a 30-minute conversation with someone with completely opposite political views as you. And as challenging as that may be to have to tolerate that dimension, I think both people come out more enlightened as a result.
Thank you very much for that. We have another raised hand from Beverly Wheeler.
Hi, thank you so much. I really do appreciate what you've done. So my question is, how do we prioritize which demographic group we're going to tailor AI and personalized learning to? For example, my husband is totally blind. So as soon as I saw your first slide that talked about sensory introduction, I realized, wow, all of this stuff has visual applications to it, which are no good to my husband or no good to maybe some of our children who are special education children. But how do we prioritize this incredible research that is that could in fact be available to help people learn?
That's, that's $1 million question. And hopefully there's some policy folks here in this meeting to really think about, what groups are most vulnerable. I would say maybe prioritizing by starting out with what groups are most at risk for these technologies to be adversely used against them. And sometimes the the adverse use is not even intentional. It is the ignorance of the developers to not have that perspective that creates these biases. Uh, a couple months ago was the first incident of an AI facial recognition system classifying a black man or anybody in the U.S. as a criminal when it was actually incorrect classification. So the cops acted on this algorithm and arrested the wrong person. So, we may want to start off with groups that are already at risk of these algorithms being potentially used in ways. Again, it may not be intentional or malicious, but we should focus on the outcomes and ensure that vulnerable groups aren't adversely affected. I think would be a good starting point.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you very much for that. We have another question in the chat. This dovetails slightly with some of the things we've been talking about in the last couple of questions. How do you make AI recognize all faces? Is there a focus in AI to fix this issue?
That's a great question. How do people recognize all faces? Are there biases in how people forget AI? Let's just look at everyone here. Pre-COVID, if I walked into a gas station with a mask on, even if it were winter, would there be an awareness or bias that's created? There were certain groups that were very concerned when these mask mandates started to go out, that they may be incorrectly classified and labeled in another way. What if someone has face markings or ties their head, or how do you know what a face is? It seems like a trivial question, but it's a really challenging problem for a computer to recognize, because beyond just the color of our skin, there are many different augmentations that we can have to our faces: glasses, tattoos, face coverings that could augment the look of a person. So would you prefer an AI algorithm that got it wrong some of the time? Or would you prefer an AI algorithm that could recognize faces all of the time, but also sometimes think, burnt toast were faces because it has, the story of faces showing up on things we don't expect. So which would society prefer? And I think that's really an open question that has not been addressed yet.
Thank you for that, Dr. Tucker. Another question we have here. This is a two-parter. What does the machine learning's value chain mean for geopolitics? And how do you think AI and its personalized learning will affect international politics?
So many people are calling AI, machine learning, the new gold rush. And there's good reason to believe that this will indeed impact geopolitics. The challenge is going to be, is it a race to the bottom in terms of privacy and policy, or do you uphold your morals and principles, but then potentially get left behind in terms of a competitive advantage? Let's take, for example, Europe's GDPR data privacy law. If that causes certain AI companies to shift from Europe to other countries that have less stringent requirements of data, would that put Europe at a strategic disadvantage? And so, as a country, as an organization, as an entity, where is that balance? On the flip side, you could say that the state owns all data, and therefore, you have these robust algorithms that can meet the diversity of a wide range of people. But at the same time, you're trading the privacy of citizens. And these are the geopolitical questions that we're going to have to answer. And I wonder, what's going to be the policies around this. Naively, you would think, well, would we ever move to a world where we have like an international standard that all countries abide by? But then again, you see many of the challenges that exist in today's world, when countries try to come together to have policy. So I think it's definitely going to be a geopolitical action item. The outcomes right now are still uncertain.
Thank you very much for that. We have a hand raised from Bo Chen.
Hi, Professor Tucker. My name is Bo, and it's a pleasure listening to you sharing with me your path to the field of machine learning. My question is also a two-parter. For one, I'm a huge fan of game theory and reinforcement learning. Where do you see like the potential with these two studies? The second part is, what do you look for when it comes to PhD students?
So great question. Hopefully the latter question is posed because you're maybe interested in our lab, and I'll get to that question. I'll start off with your first question about game theory and reinforcement learning. So these are definitely parts of machine learning. I think when you think of game theory and Nash equilibrium, that's really going back to answering the question of what's going to be the strategy for CMU, what's going to be the strategy for the US and other entities when we think of how to make investments in AI. From the reinforcement learning perspective, this is really interesting because it opens the door to have trial and error, and thinking of learning with feedback from the environment. So that's definitely an active area of research. And if either of these topics interest you, by all means, follow up with me. We're actively looking for hardworking PhD students. I would say one of the qualities that I've seen consistent across successful graduate students is just having a passion for what you do. You can see from early childhood, I've had a passion for aviation, right? In fact, before COVID, I was supposed to start back up. You can see the flight school training manual in my desk shelf back there. So you could see many of my examples today were planes. And I would say just always having a passion and not giving up on those passions and trying to find ways to integrate things you're passionate about in your research.
Thank you very much for taking all this time with us. We have one final question, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Skinner for some final remarks. The last question is, how welcoming or supportive have you found CMU culture to be, and what can we do to improve it?
Well, I found it very welcoming. I would not even entertain moving, because moving with a family is a big decision. And so we spent several visits meeting with different people, just getting a sense of the community. And so we found it very welcoming, at least from our experience. But I think what we have to remember is that our lived experiences do not necessarily mean that that is the lived experience of even people that look like us. I remember when we were considering moving here, we asked different people, how's this neighborhood? How's this neighborhood? And the response would be, oh yeah, it's great to raise kids in, or it's great community, but great for who, right? And I think that question we should always keep in the back of our mind to try to answer those questions from the perspective of who is asking. So fortunately for us, the responses have been positive, and we've had a great experience up until this point.
That's great to hear. I'm glad. Dr. Tucker, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experiences and your research with us. And I will turn the final remarks over to Dr. Skinner.
Thank you, Bill, for managing the Q&A. And of course, thank you, Professor Tucker, for giving your time and sharing your journey with us and your research. We look forward to pulling you more into the social science and policy side of AI. I was so pleased to see that Professor David Danks asked a question. He's part of the, and really the leader of the social science and AI and humanities community at the university. So we look forward to working with you. We thank you for your leadership very quickly at CMU. It was a pleasure last year to join your panel and your conference. And I think we have a lot of work ahead. And thank you also for your comments about CMU. I think having you here is going to help make CMU a much more not only diverse environment, but one that really is more equitable and brings in students across the spectrum to undergraduate and graduate study at the university. I'm so pleased that a number of department heads and deans have joined these calls. It's so critical to have university leadership, and I see the Dean of Mellon College here. If you'd like to say a word or two. We haven't met in person, but I've seen your name at almost every event, and I don't know how you do it, how you find the time, but it's great to have you here.
First, I want to congratulate Conrad on all of his most recent accomplishments. So congratulations, and thank you for sharing your journey with us. I think that the personal connection of understanding people's journeys without assumptions because of what we see is super important. And I commend Dr. Skinner and Ali for arranging all of this. I've been at almost all of them and hopping in and out of others. So thank you. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Thank you. We have two big ones coming up next week. And if Ali, you know the dates and times, if you could tell us really quickly. We're hoping for really good audiences, and I think we're going to start winding down for the semester, but we'll start up again, and it'll be an even bigger term with amazing national thought leaders. Ali?
Thank you. Yes, so next week we have a professional journeys discussion with Ambassador Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, who is a 30-year diplomat. She's the former U.S. ambassador to Malta. So we're really excited that she's joining us. And then on Friday, November 20th at noon, we have Secretary Condoleezza Rice joining us to talk about race in America. All of that is on our website. Bill, if you could throw in the chat the link to our SERP page, that would be really helpful. Everyone who was on the call today will also get an email from me tomorrow morning, so you will get it there as well. But please do join us if you can.
Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you, Conrad Tucker. See you all next week.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.